The warehouse smelled like concrete, cigarette smoke, and fear. And Jonadise Beaumont loved every bit of it. She walked in at exactly 11:47 p.m. wearing a cream silk blouse, wide-leg camel trousers, nude heels, and pearl earrings her mama had sent from Florida for her birthday. Her edges were laid. Her nails were done in quiet almond-shaped beige. She looked like she was about to present at a board meeting for a cosmetics company. The 26 men standing in that warehouse? They looked like they were about to have a heart attack. "Queen." Big Remy's voice dropped low as she entered, and just like that, like a wave moving through water, every single man in the room bent their head. Not a dramatic bow, just a quiet, instinctive lowering, like their bodies understood something their mouths would never say out loud. Joan didn't acknowledge it. She never did. She walked to the center of the room, placed her Bottega bag on the table like she was setting it down at brunch, and looked at the trembling man zip-tied to the chair in front of her. Park Dong-soo, 43, mid-level distributor who thought he could skim from her shipment and blame it on port delays. Joan tilted her head. "Port delays," she said softly, like she was tasting the words. "Baby, I own 3 port officials, 2 customs directors, and a very tired harbormaster who calls me every Friday to report his week." She smiled, warm, almost maternal. "So tell me again. Port delays." The man started crying before she even finished the sentence. Joan sighed, pulled out her phone, and sent a voice note to her mama. "Morning, mama. Yes, I'm eating. Yes, I'm sleeping. Okay, I love you too. Bye." She hit send, looked back at Park Dong-soo, and nodded once at Big Remy. "Freeze his accounts. All 4 of them. Then let him go." She picked up her bag. "He's not worth the energy. And somebody get this man some water. He looks dehydrated." She was already walking out when the room exhaled. Outside, her blacked-out G-Wagon was waiting. Yemi was in the passenger seat eating banana chips and scrolling TikTok. "How'd it go?" Yemi asked without looking up. "Resolved." Joan slid into the back. "He cried." "They always cry." Yemi finally looked at her. "Okay, but bestie, tomorrow. The latte charity gala. I pulled 3 options for you and I need you to commit because I am not doing alterations at midnight again." Joan looked out the window at Seoul glittering below her. She had built something extraordinary in this city. Invisible, vast, and untouchable. She ran 3 legitimate companies as cover. She gave to orphanages. She had lunch with senators. She called her mama every morning. She went to church when she was in Florida. And every single night, she ran the largest independent crime network in East Asia. Nobody connected the dots, because nobody expected the dots to look like her. "Send me the options," she said, "and order me jollof rice. I'm starving." The gala the next evening was exactly the kind of event Joan moved through like water, effortlessly, without leaving a ripple. Yemi had won. Joan wore a deep emerald gown, structured at the shoulders, open at the back, with a thigh-high slit that made the room rearrange itself when she walked in. Her locks were pinned up in an elegant crown. Gold jewelry, nothing excessive. Perfume that cost more than most people's rent. She worked the room like breathing, laughing at the right moments, complimenting the right wives, signing 2 mental business agreements over champagne without anyone realizing they'd just shaken hands on a deal. She was halfway through a conversation with a diplomat's wife about the best lamb chops in Itaewon when she felt it. The stare. Joan had been stared at her whole life. She knew the difference between a stare of admiration, confusion, or threat. This one was different. It had weight to it. Intention. She finished her sentence, excused herself gracefully, and turned. He was standing across the room, with 2 men flanking him, holding a glass of whiskey, wearing a black tuxedo that looked custom because it absolutely was. Korean, tall, broad-shouldered in a way that the jacket barely contained, with a jaw so clean it looked like God had used a ruler. He was looking at her like she was the first interesting thing he'd seen in years. Kang Sejuan. She knew the name. Everyone in Korean business circles knew the name. Inherited wealth, expanded it threefold. Notoriously private. Notoriously selective. Appeared at maybe 4 public events a year. Joan met his gaze for exactly 2 seconds, then looked away. Let him come to you, she thought. They always come. He came. You were going to leave without speaking to me, he said, appearing at her side 12 minutes later. His Korean was smooth, but he switched to English after clocking her. That would have been unfortunate. Joan turned to him slowly, like she'd forgotten he existed. Were we supposed to speak? He blinked. Not used to that. Good. Kang Sejuan. He extended his hand. I know who you are, she said pleasantly, shaking it. Joan Beaumont. I know who you are too, he said. 3 companies. Forbes feature 2 years ago. Florida originally. He smiled, and God, the smile was unfair. It crinkled at the corners and made him look younger, more genuine. I did my reading. Interesting hobby. Joan accepted a fresh glass of champagne from a passing tray without breaking eye contact. What else did your reading tell you? That you're the most impressive person in this room. He said it simply, not flirtatiously, like a fact he was reporting. Joan almost laughed. Almost. That's a big room, she said. I'm aware. He tilted his head. Have dinner with me. No. He paused. That was new for him, she could tell. No, he repeated. Was there an echo? She smiled, sweet as peach tea. No. I don't know you. That's the point of dinner. She considered him. Give me your number. I'll think about it. The look on his face, like he'd just been handed a puzzle he desperately wanted to solve, was worth every second of the performance. He put his number in her phone. She thanked him with a smile that promised nothing and everything, excused herself, and found Yemi across the room. Okay, what was that? Yemi whispered, grabbing her arm. What was what? Joan. Bestie. That man has been watching you for 40 minutes and now he looks like he just met God and God told him to figure himself out. Joan took a sip of champagne. He gave me his number. Yemi screamed silently. Are you going to call him? Joan thought about the warehouse last night. The 26 men. The weight of everything she carried. Every hour of every day. The empire she'd built with her bare hands in a country that wasn't hers. In a game nobody had invited her to play. Eventually, she said. What Joan did not know, could not have known, because she was busy being unbothered, was that 40 feet away, Sejuan's bodyguard, Detective Min Hyun-jae, was already typing. Hyun-jae had worked for Sejuan for 6 years. He had a system. Anytime someone new entered Sejuan's orbit with real interest, he ran a full background on them within the hour. Clean sources, dark sources, all sources. He started with Joan Adiz Beaumont's 3 companies. Clean. Too clean. He dug deeper. And then deeper. And then he sat back in his chair at 2 a.m. in the Gala's parking garage and stared at his screen for a very long time. Then he typed one message to a contact. The woman Sejuan spoke to tonight. How high does she go? The response came back in 4 minutes. She is the top. Don't touch this, Hyun-jae. Genuinely. Don't. Hyun-jae looked at the photo of Joan on his screen. Pearl earrings, warm smile, champagne glass, and felt something cold settle in his stomach, because she didn't look like what she was. That was the most terrifying part. Meanwhile, Joan was in her apartment, face mask on, bonnet secured, watching a Nigerian movie on her laptop when her phone buzzed. A text from Mama Gloria. Baby, I prayed for you extra long today. God told me to cover you. You okay? Joan stared at the message for a moment. She typed back, I'm perfect, Mama. Thank you. I love you. She set the phone down, looked at the ceiling. Then she picked it back up, scrolled to Sejuan's unsaved number, and saved it. Not with his name. She saved it as not yet. Joan made him wait 11 days. Not because she was playing games. She genuinely had a business war to manage in Busan, 2 shipments to reroute through a new channel after her Incheon contact got greedy, and a Thursday morning call with her mama that always ran long because Mama Gloria could talk about the church choir for 45 minutes without pausing for oxygen. She was busy. The man would have to wait. Sejuan apparently did not handle waiting well. Day 3, a text. Still thinking. Joan read it, smiled, and put her phone face down. Day 5. I found a restaurant I think you'd like. No pressure. Just thought of you. She showed it to Yemi, who lost her mind entirely. Day 7. Okay, I'm aware I'm being persistent. I just think you're worth being persistent about. Joan, Yemi said, reading over her shoulder. Joan. He's fine, Joan said mildly, refreshing her email. He is more than fine. He is a whole meal writing you paragraph texts like a man with feelings. Yemi, I have a call in 10 minutes. I will never forgive you if you let this man go. Day 11. Joan was sitting in her home office after closing a deal that added 9 figures to an account nobody could trace back to her. And she was feeling, for the first time in a while, something adjacent to celebratory. She poured herself a small glass of red wine, put on sod, and texted Sijuan. Saturday, 7 p.m. You picked the place. Don't disappoint me. His response came in 30 seconds. I've been ready for 11 days. I won't. Joan sipped her wine. She told herself the warmth in her chest was the Bordeaux. Saturday dinner was at a private restaurant in Gangnam that Sijuan had quietly reserved entirely for them. Not in a showy way, just an I wanted us to be able to talk without interruption way that Joan clocked and filed away. He was thoughtful. That was more dangerous than flashy. He was already there when she arrived, standing as she walked in, and his expression when he saw her in her Bordeaux wrap dress and gold hoops was the kind of expression that men spent their whole lives trying to hide and usually failed at. You came, he said. I said I would. She sat, arranged herself, looked at him across the candlelight. Eventually, he laughed. Genuine surprised, and she decided she liked his laugh. It was the laugh of someone who didn't perform happiness. They talked for 3 hours. About Seoul and Miami and the way cities felt different at 3 a.m. About his father who had built an empire and never slept. About her mama's cooking and how no Korean restaurant had yet given her the spiritual experience of a proper Floridian Sunday plate. He was sharp, funny in a dry way she hadn't expected. He actually listened, in the way that people who were used to being the most important person in every room sometimes forgot how to do. She told him about her businesses. The real ones, the legitimate architecture. He asked smart questions. He did not ask about the other things, because he didn't know. She watched him all evening and thought, I could really like you. That is a problem. At the end of the night, he walked her to her car. They stood on the street and the Seoul air was cold and clean and he looked at her like she was a decision he'd already made. Second date? He asked. She pretended to consider. You were okay. I was better than okay. Adequate, she said seriously. Above average. Joan. Call me. She got in the car. He stood there laughing on the street as the car pulled away and Yemi, who had been parked around the corner like an agent on surveillance, pulled up alongside the G-Wagon immediately and rolled down her window. Report. Drive, Yemi. I will not drive until you report. Joan paused, looked out the window. He's really good. Yemi absolutely lost it. They fell into something neither of them named for a while. Dinner became dinners. Texting became calls that lasted past midnight. He sent her flowers once. Not roses, which she'd expected, but birds of paradise because he'd mentioned offhandedly 3 weeks earlier that roses felt like a default and she'd laughed and said she preferred flowers with personality. He'd remembered. Joan, who controlled entire criminal networks through pure force of will, was slightly terrified. She was also, for the first time in years, having fun. Real fun. The banter between them was electric. She never let him get comfortable, always redirected, always kept him slightly on his toes. He matched her. He pushed back when she expected surrender. He challenged her in ways that made her laugh even when she didn't want to. And then Min Hyun-jae appeared. It was a Tuesday. Joan was leaving her Gangnam office building. Alone? Yemi having gone ahead to pick up lunch, when a man stepped out of a black sedan and fell into stride beside her. She recognized him instantly. Sijuan's bodyguard. She'd seen him twice at a distance. Quiet, watchful, the kind of man who scanned every room before his employer entered it. Ms. Beaumont, Hyun-jae said quietly, eyes forward. We need to speak. We're speaking, Joan said pleasantly, not breaking her stride. I know who you are. He kept his voice low, professional. Not Joan Beaumont, the CEO. The other one. Joan walked 3 more steps before responding. Bold of you, she said, tone unchanged, still pleasant as Sunday morning. To approach me alone. Interesting strategic choice. I have documentation, Hyun-jae said. Financial trails, network connections, eyewitness accounts from 3 separate informants. I'll take it to Sejun if you don't end this. Joan stopped walking. She turned to Hyunjae slowly, and something shifted in her face. Not menace, nothing dramatic, just a very quiet clearing away of warmth, like a cloud moving in front of the sun. Her eyes, usually sparkling with amusement, went very still. Hyunjae, she said softly, I know you love your boss. I respect that. I genuinely do. She tilted her head. But let me explain something to you very calmly, because I like you and I don't want this to become unpleasant. Hyunji's jaw was tight. He didn't respond. I know about the documentation. I've known about it since day 5 of you digging. She smiled. I also know about your mother in Taejun who is waiting on her insurance claim. I know about your apartment in Mapo. I know you have a dog named Samba. The smile stayed exactly the same, warm, unbothered. I'm not threatening those things. I'm just explaining that I see you very clearly, and I am not what frightens me. Hyunjae was very still. Now, she straightened. I understand your concern. You're right to be concerned, you're doing your job. And I am going to tell Sejun who I am. On my timeline, in my way, when I decide the moment is right. Not because you pushed me. Because I care about him enough to be honest. She picked her bag up higher on her shoulder. If you go to him before I do, if you take that choice from me, I promise you, Hyunjae, the only unpleasant thing that happens is that your boss loses the chance to hear it from me first. And that would genuinely make me sad. She held his gaze for one more moment. Enjoy your lunch, she said, and walked away. Hyunjae stood on that Gangnam Street for a long time. His hands were steady because he was trained for that. His heart rate was not. He thought about Samba, his mother, his apartment. He thought about the way she'd said I care about him enough. He got back in his car and did not make any calls. 6 weeks later, Joan sat in her conference room at the head of a table of 12, preparing to sign the largest deal of her life. A resort development acquisition spanning 4 provinces, a logistics network restructure, and a tech infrastructure investment. Everything she'd spent 3 years positioning toward. $300 million. Her biggest legal win, the crown jewel of her above-ground empire. The other party's lead investor was flying in from Japan. She'd done her research. She'd read the name on the documents 17 times. Different name. Shell company. Standard billionaire opacity. She was reviewing final terms when the conference room doors opened. And Kang Sejun walked in. The room went so quiet that Joan heard the air conditioner. He saw her at the same moment she registered him, and his face moved through approximately 4 different emotions in 2 seconds. Shock, confusion, something that looked like wonder, and then a careful professional blankness he assembled rapidly. Joan looked at him. He looked at her. The 11 other people in the room looked between them like spectators at a tennis match. Joan put down her pen, leaned back in her chair, and then, because she was Joan Adiz Beaumont and she had never once in her life let a moment swallow her, she laughed. Not a polite laugh, a real one. From her belly, the kind that filled the room, helpless and genuine. Oh, she managed. Oh, this is. She pressed her hand to her mouth, shoulders shaking. I'm sorry. Give me a second. Sejun stared at her. And then, against what was clearly his every professional intention, he started laughing too. Quietly at first, then fuller, until he pulled out the chair directly across from her and sat down, and they were both laughing in a conference room full of bewildered lawyers and assistants. You're the buyer, he finally said. You're the investor, she said. I've been eating dinner with you for 2 months. You've been eating dinner with me for 2 months, she confirmed. You never mentioned. They looked at each other. Okay, Joan said, composing herself and smoothing her blazer. She looked around the table. Let's take a 15-minute break. Everyone out, please. She smiled pleasantly. Now. The room cleared at a speed that suggested they understood her tone. When the door closed, Sejun looked at her across the table and the laughter had settled into something more complex. Joan. Sejun. This whole time. I didn't know it was you. The investor name on the documents was a holding company. She leaned forward on her elbows. Did you know it was me? Of course not. He ran a hand through his hair. I would have said something. So we're both surprised. We're both surprised, he agreed, and then quieter. Were you ever going to tell me we'd been circling the same deal? I didn't know, she said honestly. Sujuin. And what else? His voice was still level, but there was an undercurrent now. What else didn't you tell me? What else am I about to find out is? Let's sign the deal first. Joan. The business is separate from us. Sign the deal, Sujuin. It's a good deal, you know it's a good deal, and my feelings for you don't change the numbers. She held his gaze. Separate the two. He looked at her for a long moment. He signed. He asked for space 3 days later. Not dramatically. Sujuin was not dramatic. He called her on a Wednesday evening, voice careful, and said, I need some time to think. I feel like there's a version of you I haven't met yet, and I don't know how to feel about that. Joan said, okay. He said, I'm not ending anything. I just... Sujuin, she said. I said okay. A pause. Take your time. She hung up. Then she sat in her living room in her apartment overlooking Seoul, in her bonnet and her pajamas with a glass of water and her Bible on the coffee table. Because Wednesday nights she always tried to read, and she felt something she hadn't felt since she was 15 years old and the entire school had laughed at her in the cafeteria. Small. Not for long. She wasn't built for small. But for a moment, just a moment, in the privacy of her own apartment with nobody watching and nobody to control and no empire to maintain, she sat with it. She called Yemi. He asked for space, she said when Yemi picked up. Silence. Then, Joan. I'm fine. Are you crying? No, she was not crying. Her eyes were simply doing something unexpected. I'm fine, Yemi. Okay. Yemi's voice was soft. Come over. No. I'm going to read and sleep. Joan. I knew what I was doing when I let him in, Joan said quietly. This is what happens. People find out who you are. He doesn't know who you are, Yemi said. Not the real. That's the problem, Joan said. She slept badly. He also, notably, did not sleep. Sujuin lay in his penthouse at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling with the full incomprehensible awareness that he had not once in 38 years lost sleep over a person. He had dated women who were beautiful, accomplished, appropriate for his life. He had ended those things cleanly when they ran their course. He had been called emotionally unavailable by at least 2 of them and had privately thought, probably fair. Joan Beaumont had been in his life for 3 months. And he could not sleep. He thought about the way she laughed. Full and unguarded when something was genuinely funny, and not at all when it wasn't, and the distinction was sharp enough to make every Rayal laugh feel like a gift. He thought about how she'd looked in that conference room, recognizing him, and how she'd been the only person in that situation who immediately located the humor in it. He thought about the conversations that had wandered past midnight, about her mama's prayers and her feelings about Seoul and the way she ate. Seriously, fully, like food was worth respecting. He thought about how she had never once needed him to rescue her from anything. He picked up his phone and looked at their text thread for 20 minutes. Put it back down. Picked it up again. He called Hyunjae. There's something you need to tell me, Sujuin said when Hyunjae answered, half asleep. About Joan. You've been strange since week 4. Tell me now. A long silence. Boss. Hyunjae. Another silence. And then Hyunjae told him. Not everything. Hyunjae was careful. Protective even in honesty. But enough. Enough that Sujuin sat up in his bed in the dark and listened and didn't say a word for a long time. When Hyunjae finished, Sujuin asked, She threatened you? She informed me, Hyunjae said carefully. There's a difference. Did she hurt you? No. Did she threaten my business? My family? No. Hyunjae paused. She said she was going to tell you herself. On her timeline. Sujuin sat with that for a while. I care about him enough to be honest, Hyunjae had said, she said. I need to talk to her, Sujuin said. Boss, Hyunjae said carefully. I need you to understand what I'm telling you. What she? I heard you. Sujuin was already getting up. I'm not a fool, Hyunjae. I understand what it means. He paused. I also know her. Whatever this is, I know her. Those aren't contradictions I'm ready to walk away from. He showed up at her door on a Friday evening without calling. Joan opened the door in her house clothes. Leggings, an oversized Florida Anim hoodie, bonnet on her head, a spatula in her hand because she'd been making herself attempt a Korean recipe Yemi had sent her. She stared at him. He stared at her. "You could have called," she said. "You would have had a response ready." He looked at her. "I didn't want a response. I wanted you." Joan's grip tightened on the spatula. "Come in," she said finally. "I'm burning something." She did not burn anything because she saved it in time, and Sejun sat at her kitchen island watching her move with the focused competence she applied to absolutely everything, and he said, "Tell me. All of it. The real version." Joan turned the heat down, wiped her hands, leaned against the counter across from him and looked at him for a moment. Reading the room the way she always did, cataloging, deciding. Then she told him. She told him about being 14 in Tallahassee. About the lunch table she couldn't sit at, and the clothes she couldn't afford, and the day 7 girls had surrounded her in the bathroom, and the ringleader had said, "Who do you think you are?" And Joan had gone home that night and asked herself the same question for 6 hours. She told him about deciding she would never again be the person that question was asked to. That she would build something so formidable that nobody would look at her and see weakness. She told him she'd been smart enough to find the right people and mean enough to hold them together and disciplined enough to build 2 lives simultaneously, and that she'd been doing it for so long she sometimes forgot which one was supposed to be real. She told him about the orphanages she funded anonymously, about the girls' schools in 3 provinces that her money had built under shell foundations that would never trace to her, about the people in her network she'd quietly helped out of circumstances that had trapped them the way school had trapped her. "I'm not a good person," she said, clear-eyed, no performance. "I know that. I've done things. I'm not pretending otherwise." "Are you safe?" Sejun asked. His voice was quiet. "Right now, is all of this, are you safe?" She blinked. "Of all the questions." "Yes," she said. "Okay." He nodded slowly. "Sejun, I've just told you. I know what you've told me." He looked at her across the kitchen. "I've been lying here 6 days trying to be reasonable about this, and the unreasonable thing is that I miss you. I sat with all the things I'm supposed to feel. Betrayed, cautious, sensible. And underneath all of them the only real thing was that I missed you." He shook his head. "I don't know what to do with that." Joan looked at him for a long time. "Neither do I," she admitted. First thing she'd admitted to not knowing in years. He reached across the counter and took her hand. They were quiet for a while. "I want you to talk to someone," he said carefully. "A professional. Not because anything is wrong with you. I need you to hear that. Because what you carried alone, from 14 years old, the weight of it." He stopped. His thumb moved over her knuckles. "You deserved people. You deserved a lunch table and someone to sit with, and you built an empire instead. That's extraordinary. It's also not fair. Someone should have helped you carry it." Joan was quiet. The thing about Sejun, the terrifying, irreversible thing she had not accounted for, was that he saw her. Not the queen, not the CEO, not the woman in the emerald gown. Just her. "You came here on a Friday night," she said finally, voice steady. "To my house, to tell me you want me to go to therapy. Among other things." He squeezed her hand. "Come eat dinner with me. I'm cooking. You were burning something before I arrived. Come eat dinner with me." Joan laughed. Just like that, like he always found it without trying, he found the laugh. "You're annoying," she told him. "You're the most extraordinary person I've ever met," he said simply. "Come on." The therapist was a woman named Dr. Park Sua, trilingual, patient, and completely unfazed by powerful people. Sejun had chosen carefully. Joan went every week. She did not love it at first. She sat in that room and was precise and controlled and gave exactly as much as she calculated was necessary. Dr. Park was too good to be fooled and not impressed enough to be moved by performance. By the 4th session, Joan had cried exactly once and decided she hated it. She went back the next week, and the week after, and somewhere in the months that followed, in the controlled demolition of every wall she'd spent 20 years building, she found something she hadn't known was missing. A version of herself that didn't have to be invincible. That could be uncertain sometimes. That could let someone carry half the weight. Sejun was an extraordinary carrier. Not in an overbearing way, he never once tried to fix or manage or rescue. He just showed up. consistently, reliably, with his dry humor and his particular gift for knowing when she needed conversation and when she needed to be next to someone quiet and not be required to perform anything. They fought spectacularly sometimes. Joan was not built for passive and Sejun was not built for pushover, and occasionally their stubbornness collided at high speed and the results were dramatic. But neither of them left. They worked it through with a thoroughness that matched everything else they did. He made her laugh every day. She kept him perpetually on his toes, and he had never been more awake in his life. The mansion she had always dreamed about. She described it once, late at night, half asleep, in that unguarded space where true things slip out. Big white house, lots of windows, a farm in the back, actual animals, somewhere you can breathe. She'd said it once. He'd remembered. On her birthday, 2 years after a woman in an emerald dress had made a man forget what he'd been about to say at a charity gala. Sejun took her to the Gyeonggi province and showed her a property that sat on 17 acres, white-framed windows, land that rolled out behind it in greens and golds, 3 horses already in the paddock because he'd asked her which animals she liked 6 months ago during what she'd thought was idle conversation. Joan stood in the middle of it and looked at the house and the land and the light, and she thought about 14-year-old her in that Tallahassee bathroom. Who do you think you are? She thought, I finally know. Sejun stood beside her. He didn't say anything. He knew her well enough to know that the moment needed space. She found his hand. He held it. Inside the house, they moved through the rooms together and the light came through those windows exactly the way she'd wanted. And in the big kitchen with the farm sink she turned and looked at him. This man who had chased her for weeks and challenged her and infuriated her and made her feel, for the first time, like the most interesting possible version of herself. You're incredibly irritating, she told him. You've mentioned that, he said. I love you, she said. Sejun looked at her with the expression she had learned over 2 years was the one underneath everything else. Underneath the businessman and the careful and the composed. Just Sejun. Completely undone by her. I know, he said. I love you too. A beat. I've been waiting for you to say it first. Joan squinted at him. How long have you been waiting? 8 months. Sejun. His laughter filled the house. Her house. Their house, eventually. Outside, the horses moved in the paddock and the light was gold and the land was big and breathing. And somewhere in Florida, Mama Gloria Beaumont woke up from a nap with a feeling she couldn't name but that made her get on her knees right there beside the bed. Thank you, she prayed, not knowing exactly what for. Just thank you. God, who keeps track of all such things, noted it. And Joan Adiz Beaumont, queen, empire, woman, was finally, fully, gloriously home.
Hello besties, in this story we learned that power without peace is just a prettier cage. John had everything, the empire, the money, the fear of every room she walked into, but he was still that 14-year-old girl in the bathroom, building walls instead of a home. Real strength wasn't the network she ran or the men who bowed their heads. It was the courage to let someone see her, choose healing over armor, and finally believe she deserves softness just as much as she deserves success. Besties, you can rule the world and still need to be loved. That's not weakness. That's the most human thing there is. Thank you so much for watching. Can you like, subscribe, and share?